Thank you. Wonderful, again, to see all of you and be together, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. And Kip, you seem like you're channeling Peter Flint here, so thank you for that. Now, in the Old Testament, the prophet Ezekiel records the words of the Lord God. A new heart I will give you, and a new spirit I will put within you, and I will remove from your body the heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. Centuries later, a Jewish Essene songwriter reflected on these words, writing a new poem song, or we could call it a hodaya, or a thanksgiving hymn or psalm. I am a creature of clay and dust and a heart of stone, yet you have given 2 ears of dust, and you have engraved eternity on the heart of stone. Written over 2,000 years ago, this poem song was discovered on a scroll with many other poem songs, many other thanksgiving hymns, in a cave at the site of Qumran on the shores of the Dead Sea. Some of these are believed to be written by the teacher of righteousness, the founder of the community, who saw himself as one upon whom God had created eternity, had engraved eternity, even when his heart was not yet flesh, but still of stone. In his study of prayer and worship in the Dead Sea Scrolls, George Brooke describes the Thanksgiving hymns as quote, heavily scriptural and deeply spiritual poems to encourage the reader to identify with his experiences of rejection and suffering and a sense of the saving mercy of God in rescuing him from the hands of his enemies. Brooke continues that although many scriptural motifs, especially from the classical prophets and psalms, are used, the language also seems to be genuinely autobiographical. Now, tonight I will be speaking about the scrolls differently than I ever really have in an academic setting. Usually it's logical and linear presentations, but tonight I would simply like to introduce you to some of the songs of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and my personal and spiritual journey will come into it as well, alongside the people of the Dead Sea Scrolls and their songs of suffering. You know, the year was 2001. I was a first-year master's student here at Trinity Western, studying under world-class Dead Sea Scrolls scholars, Marty Abegg and Peter Flint. One sunny February morning, I was starting the course on the scrolls. My husband and I were on Main Island, and I don't know what I did. Oh, fixed it. I'm a technologically challenged grandmother, so I'm always happy when something works. Okay, but one sunny February morning, my husband and I were on Main Island, and I went to Lighthouse Park to sit and read, and I opened up my English translation of the Dead Sea Scrolls, just as my students did a week or 2 ago as they read through all of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I began to read, and I came to the Thanksgiving Psalms and was captivated by the powerful and fresh word pictures that describe the experience of the suffering writer. The first line of some of these songs is, I thank you, O Lord, and it is believed that every song, each of the poem songs, began with that, even where the text is broken and it may be missing. Even the ones permeated with expressions of lament and suffering were framed by thanksgiving. I thank you, O Lord. So let's just take a look at a few of the examples, a few excerpts from these songs, and with some of the metaphors and word pictures. Here's one that uses the word picture of breaking waves. The breaking waves fly over me, and my soul is completely worn down. For my strength is departed from my body. My heart is poured out as water. No more can my tongue give forth its voice for instruction, to revive the spirits of those who stumble, and to support the weary with the word. The voice of my lips is silent. And as I read that, I imagine a teacher. I imagine a teacher in the loss of voice, of a soul worn down. and a voice silenced. But there is hope in another one of the Thanksgiving Psalms about the recreation of the one who speaks. It's a creation song, and it begins with this beautiful expression to the Creator. You yourself stretched out the heavens for your glory, stars according to their paths, and all the storm winds according to their tasks, meteors and lightning according to their service, and storehouses designed for their needs. You have created the earth with your strength, seas and deeps. You have determined your wisdom and all that is in them according to your will. Everything comes to pass, and without you, nothing is done. Here, the writer is writing of the glorious creation of the heavens and the angels, stars, meteors, lightning bolts, the earths and seas and their deep. But then there's a dramatic shift, signaled on a scroll or signified on a scroll by a substantial physical space on the parchment, and the songwriter shifts to that part of creation that was himself, piling on metaphors that are somewhat less than glorious. But it first of all starts with this. First he says, "These things I know because of understanding that comes from you, for you have opened my ears to wonderful mysteries." It's like, even though, and here he goes, "I am a vessel of clay and a thing kneaded with water, a foundation of shame and a well of impurity, a melting pot of iniquity and a structure of sin, a spirit of error and a perverted being without understanding and terrified by righteous judgments." Now in the creation story in Genesis would have told the songwriter here that humanity is formed from dust, and from Psalm 103 verse 14 he would have known that we are formed, that God remembers that we are of dust. And Isaiah 64:8, "Yet, O Lord, you are our Father, we are the clay, you are our potter," all suggesting from the scriptures that humanity remains dust and clay even as we live and breathe. But in the Dead Sea Scrolls song, the composer intensifies this with extreme language in a sorrowful suffering, really, confession of his shame, impurity, iniquity, sin, error, perverted being without understanding. But even to him, it's as he marvels, God has given understanding even to one such as him, such as he, and opened his ears to wonderful mysteries. I wonder whether the writer recognized the deep irony. He had just praised God's wisdom as creator, but now, by describing himself as this vessel of clay, he is placing the responsibility for his creation, his formation, back onto his creator. But the worshiper is not paralyzed by his state, because he has turned his eyes to God, singing of a creator who continues creating, continues forming the vessel of clay. And the song goes on like this. "For you yourself created breath for the tongue. You know its words. You determine the fruit of the lips before they came about. You appoint the words by a measuring line, and the utterance of the breath of the lips by measure, in order to make known your glory." Here we have a purposeful creation, a recreation, if you will, through the lifetime of this person, marveling that God uses the raw clay and dust material and continues his work of creation into the one who speaks, the one who teaches. Perhaps even the one who's lost their voice continues to be recreated into the one who speaks. And so throughout the Thanksgiving Psalms, the Dead Sea Scrolls, are many other new songs, also saturated with the language of suffering from the biblical Psalms and prophets describing darkness, the crucible, an arm shattered and broken at the shoulder, feet caught in stumbling chains, a city under siege. Enemies are described as lions, snakes, arrows from the pit, poisoners in prison. But we return again to the breaking waves. A childbirth one. I am in distress as a woman about to give birth to her firstborn. For her pangs have fallen upon her, anguish at the mouth of her womb, writhing in the womb of the one with child. For children come into life through the breaking waves of death. She who carries a man-child is convulsed by her birth pains. For through the breaking waves of death she delivers a male child. Through the cords of Sheol bursts forth from the womb of the one with child, a wonderful counselor in his strength. A man-child delivered from the breaking waves. Cued, as if cued by the breaking waves of childbirth, the poem song quickly goes to the metaphor of the breaking waves of the sea. Those who go down to the sea are terrified by the roar of the water, and their wise men are for them as sailors on the deeps. They are tossed up to the towering waves and the breaking waves by their roar. For the Jewish scribes and storytellers and songwriters of the Dead Sea Scrolls, their scriptures were not dead texts. Far from it. Their scriptures drew them into a living and breathing conversation about questions that had arisen in the hearts of their ancestors for centuries, such as, does our suffering have meaning? What is God accomplishing within us and through us as we suffer? They knew of the waves of death from 2 Samuel 22:1, where David speaks to the Lord, the words of the song on the day when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all of his enemies, from the hand of Saul. And we have the words from 2 Samuel, the waves of death swirled around me, the torrents of destruction overwhelmed me, the cords of Sheol entangled me, the snares of death confronted me. In the ancient world, death was a too frequent visitor in the place of birth, a reality that the songwriter of antiquity seemed to understand. And there could hardly have been a more dreadful sound to a sailor than the terror-inducing roar of breaking waves that threatened destruction of ship and all life aboard. Therefore, it is not surprising that the writer chose the familiar scriptural image of breaking waves of death to describe his own suffering. Now, as a person who likes to sail, I know something about the breaking waves of the sea. We were caught in a storm in the Pacific one Labor Day weekend on our sailboat, with the wind driving us and the breaking waves driving us to shore, and hearing the sound of the breaking waves and the keel of the sailboat hitting bottom, and having to work tasting terror. Have you ever tasted terror? The taste of it tastes like something. And trying to struggle to get the boat out into the sea which we did before finding safe harbor. And as a mother of 4, I also have some experience with childbirth. So these word pictures for me on that day in 2001, resonated for me. And these poem songs gave me new eyes for the scriptures and a new understanding, new way of thinking about suffering. And I wondered whether these songs of suffering permeated with thanksgiving that had helped to form this ancient community might also help to reform me. You see, at that time, it had only a year had passed since the death of our 15-year-old son, Matthew. He had been a decathlete, training daily, 6 days a week, readying for international competition. He was in the International Baccalaureate program in Abbotsford. He created artwork, wrote poetry, even music. But one Friday in January 2000, he completed a series of 5 prints, pulled from an engraving, of a cross lifted to the sky, the cross on fire, the city below on fire, windows open from heaven with light streaming down. And he penciled in the title, The Apocalypse. He signed and numbered each print, writing in the date, January 21st, 2000. And later that evening, the vehicle in which he was a passenger spun out of control on black ice and hit a telephone pole, killing him and 2 friends, all grade 10 students at Abbotsford Senior Secondary School. At the time of his death, I was taking first-year Greek here at Acts Seminary with Dr. Howard Anderson. I missed a week of class, but found myself drawn back immediately, needing something, anything, to help order the emotional chaos. Applying my mind to Greek grammar and vocabulary lists meant that, at least in those moments, I was not remembering grief. I started reading through the book of Mark in Greek, interlinearly, and then Genesis in Hebrew, word by word, line upon line, and the slow dawning of surprise of an unexpected joy woven into the grief. My husband noticed this and said out loud what I had been secretly hoping for in my heart. Why don't you start graduate school? This made no practical or financial sense at all. I was a school teacher. However, after our son died, I had no desire ever again to teach. I could never visualize having any kind of public face ever again. So no career would come out of it, I warned Greg. But he said, go ahead anyway. So I chose a master's degree that was biblical language study, coursework and thesis on the Dead Sea Scrolls, and when it came time for an advisor, I asked Dr. Marty Abegg to supervise, but I cautioned him, I will never be one of those students that you can point to as a success story. I simply want to survive grief. And he looked at me with kindness and said, I would be honored to help you. In the scrolls, I found myself among friends, among kindred spirits familiar with suffering. The outer walk, the outer story of our lives could hardly have been more different. The composers of many of the Dead Sea Scrolls were Jewish males living, most likely as celibates in a Judean desert over 2,000 years ago as part of a sectarian group calling itself the Yahad, or community. I was a married woman with children and grandchildren, and a pacifist Mennonite who found the military tone of the war scroll all rather alarming. Yet, there was an inner walk, an inner story running through the scrolls that I recognized among these Jews who so carefully searched their scriptures and whose psalms and whose prayers and laments revealed a passionate and intimate spirituality that resonated with my own cries to God. The body of a laboring mother interprets birth pangs as danger and quite naturally responds with fear. This is not surprising because most other kinds of pain are necessary alerts to danger, arousing fear and driving the sufferer to seek healing for the fracture, the cancer, the bleeding. But a mother experienced in labor knows that surrendering to fear makes it more difficult for the baby to be born. Counterintuitively, against everything her body is telling her, the woman pronounces this particular pain good and embraces the pain one breath at a time. The Qumran community was separated from temple and priesthood in Jerusalem. They understand what it meant to be ostracized and misunderstood by other Jews. But they saw how suffering and betrayal and distress had brought about something new, the very birth of their community. The metaphor of the breaking waves of storm and childbirth highlights a deep paradox. Out of the life-threatening suffering, not only God could deliver, but could deliver new life. Just as God could create life out of clay, he could continue to create what was life-giving, even out of suffering. It was in the birthing room of our community hospital and in the small hours of the morning that my husband and I first saw the face of our youngest son. 15 years later, and in the dark hours of the night, we saw him for the last time in the morgue of that very same hospital. The morgue is a very different place than the birthing room. However, maybe the lessons that we learn from suffering in the birthing room can create a tiny but secure space for hope to thrive when we encounter the place of death. And the waves of pain are profoundly similar. In the days following the death of my son, I often found myself thinking about the day of his birth. Matthew was born one breath at a time, as I surrendered to one wave of pain at a time. When I tried to escape the pain, it pursued me and terrified me. However, when I turned to face the pain with arms wide open, surrendering myself to the full strength of it, I was no longer terrified. So I wondered whether embracing this new pain would allow God once again to create something good and life-giving within me. In the Garden of Gethsemane, right before his death, Jesus himself cried out that he was overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. And he prayed, Abba, Father, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. But as we learn from the Bible and from the Dead Sea Scrolls, God does not always remove the sufferings from the ones he loves. But surrender to the breaking waves. Create some space into which hope might enter, a hope that dares believe that this suffering too might be pronounced good. And tonight, may we, like those who loved and studied the biblical Psalms and scriptures, and who offered up songs of their own among the people of the Dead Sea Scrolls, may we trust God in our areas of bereavement, in the places we are not yet healed, to live out his calling even while we are still vessels of clay with hearts of stone. To believe that our own suffering is laboring within us in ways that are hidden for the moment, but that will result in unexpected life for others, and in the end, maybe even a surprising joy for ourselves. Thank you.